the managing consultant, Pedabo, Mr. Albert Folorunsho. Thank you very much for your time on the show.
Thank you very much.
First, I'm looking at how this finance bill seeks to bridge or address the tax revenue gap. I'm looking at it because I think a lot is expected from this act. Yeah. How well do you see it playing out with regards to 2020 budget?
Definitely, if you look at the thrust of the budget, which, of course, the Finance Act, one of the objectives is to generate revenue for the government. And if you look at the provision, there are areas that are very huge in terms of revenue generation for the government. One is the increase in the VAT rate from 5% to 7.5%. That is also very huge. Another one is the fact that companies that are non-resident now doing business in Nigeria, as soon as the proper definition of significant economic presence is laid out, so much revenue is expected from that area, and that is also very important. The minimum tax rate of 0.5% is actually very huge, and one is still hoping that by the time we run it for a year, government will be able to see the impact and may consider probably reducing it, because 0.5% of your turnover, you know, whether you make profit or not, is quite huge. And so that is a major source of revenue for government.
So a lot is really expected, but many have also identified, like I was at a forum put together by your firm, and where this was talked about, and a lot of gray areas identified, talking about even some people that might have done some deals before now and, you know, signed documents and all of that. Now let's look at the gray areas in all of this. How well do you see government addressing them quickly, as fast as we can, so that we can start to get this revenue?
The government, and I also know that they are getting the support from international agencies like the IMF and the World Bank, and the Federal Revenue Service. They are fast putting documents together to guide the public, particularly when it comes to those gray areas. If you have, we have some provision relating to foreign loan, okay, the exemption that used to be available has been, you know, restructured, and so the question is, at what point, you know, will that provision apply? Okay, that is one gray area which has to be straightened out quickly. Two is the fact that for companies that are below 25 million, okay, the law has said that they're exempt from tax. A lot of people have questioned the fact that are they liable to education tax?
Yeah.
And if you go to section 23 of the company's income tax, it says that such companies are also exempt from tax. So if your profit is exempt from tax, then you are not liable to pay education tax. If you go to section 16 that deals with insurance, the question has to do with, are they exempted, are they liable to the provision of section 33 that deals with minimum tax for other companies? And of course, they have their own provision within section 16 that says notwithstanding, you know, any other provision in the act. So which means such companies are to be restricted to their own minimum tax, which is in section 16 for insurance company, which says it should be 0.5% of the premium as against what we have under gross income under the section 33 minimum tax provision. So a whole lot of those things are going to be addressed by the Federal Revenue Service, and I'm sure they are working on the circular quickly.
The one most people talk about is the VAT, the VAT, because I think that is the one that affects almost all Nigerians.
Yes.
Because now when you recharge your phone, when you send text messages, you're being debited, and you know you're seeing it there, and it tells you it's because of the additional VAT and all of that. But do you agree that VAT should be charged when you add value to production chain or supplier services? Do you agree to that? Many are saying that Nigeria shouldn't be looking this way at this time.
We cannot be saying that.
No choice.
If you look at the world over, even in the West African sub-region, the 7.5% rate may look a bit of an increase, but it's still the lowest. Even though the method that we adopted in Nigeria is the gross product method, which means you are not allowed to deduct most of your input VAT, particularly on your capital asset, on your expense items. You are supposed to expense them to your profit and loss. You are supposed to capitalize. If all of those are factored in, the rate is actually higher than 7.5%. Okay, if you compare that with the proper approach that is being used in other countries. So the rate is not really 7.5%, but be that as it may, the 7.5% is a good place to start, so that
conservative enough.
Yeah, so that we will have the opportunity in the future of impressing government to allow proper deduction for VAT on your capital items and your profit and loss on your expense items.
Maybe because for a long time we didn't look the way of taxation. That's why it's looking so new to Nigerians and very difficult for them to just take this hook, line, and sinker. Because if we had been doing this periodically as it ought to be done, we wouldn't have gotten to this point. I don't know if you think along that line.
Yeah, unfortunately, the last time we had this type of amendment was along with the budget was in 1999.
Wow.
Even though there are amendments along the line in 2007, 2004, maybe some rearrangement and all that. But from what we have heard, this is going to be an annual event, and every budget will come with the finance bill, which will be passed along with the budget. And so any of the gray area that are already been discussed on this bill now, by this time next year, we believe that they will have been straightened out. Okay, and there are arguments around allowing deduction of withholding tax from technical fees, management fee, when you deal with foreign companies. Okay, that really you don't need to start stressing the issue of significant economic presence for those ones. I believe that should be tidied up because they are more or less passive income, which will be immediate revenue for government. And that's another huge area that people are not looking at.
So one way or the other, the company income tax, in your opinion, is a reform? It is a welcome development?
It is a welcome development in several areas. If you look at the dividend tax issue, Section 19, now you can pay your dividend out even if the income is exempt. That does not mean that you cannot declare your dividend. And of course, you can declare your dividend at any time, either in the current year or in the future year, provided the tax has been paid. Not that any time you want to pay dividend, you'll be scared of having to pay company income tax. That is also very huge. The inequitable provision of insurance, has been tidied up, and they now operate like any other company. They can carry forward their losses, indefinitely like any other company. They can deduct all their claims and other outgoings just like other companies, and they're also subjected to minimum tax. A whole lot of this has been taken care of. Then we also have a new schedule, which is another controversial area. Schedule 7, okay, that has to do with thin capitalization. That is capable of not allowing companies to even deduct their unrelated interest expense. So I believe that government are also looking at that, and that will be tidied up to ensure that the thin capitalization rule is the one that has to do with, intercompany transactions.
Let's see excise duties now on imported goods, similar to local products. What do you see government starting to gain here, and will this help protect homemade goods?
That is the main objective, to ensure that companies that are in Nigeria and producing can compete with those who are importing the same products. Okay, if you don't allow them to, if you don't charge excise duty on those imported goods that are also being produced in Nigeria, they will have a competitive advantage. So the idea is that if there is any product that is manufactured in Nigeria, that the import duty rate is no longer, because of all this international trade agreement that has been lowered significantly, and so imported goods is capable of having that advantage over locally manufactured goods. So the provision is that if those goods are being manufactured in Nigeria and they are being imported, the same excise duty rate that applies to those that are locally manufactured should apply so that they can compete at the same level. It is actually to protect the local industry and stimulate industrial development.
A lot of moves here trying to just boost local production, and which is what we need to do now if we're to stabilize this economy. I think you agree with me. Now, there's always been this discussion of tax to GDP ratio, and every event we go to or everybody in the finance sector addressing journalists is always quick to talk about tax to GDP ratio. What does this really stand for? And looking at where we are in Nigeria, I think we're still doing about 6%. We've been hearing we're going for 8, we're going for 10, but we still remain at 6. How can we improve on this?
Well, the essence of the Finance Act is also to find a way to improve our tax to GDP ratio. It considers the level of tax compliance, the level of tax revenue to our GDP. And if you look at other countries within Africa, they range between 17% in Europe, close to 27%, and we're still hovering around, it's not even up to 6%. It's 5 point something.
5 something.
And so the level of compliance is really very low. And most of the compliance comes from those who have no choice than to pay their tax under the PSUN, and then of course several companies. But of course the level of compliance is still very low compared to any other country, and that is why the rate is that low. So we're trying to shore up the revenue compared to the gross domestic product.
This issue of increasing those in the tax net, getting more people from the formal, informal sector into it, where does that stand in all of this?
Of course, we know that Nigeria operates more or less, the informal sector is far bigger than the formal sector. Even though we know even within the informal sector, there are quite a number of people that are really formal, but they hide under the informal sector. So the essence is to bring in more people into the formal sector, more people into the tax net, and that is why this provision relating to 0% for small company has come into play, such that instead of operating your business as an individual and having to pay personal income tax at the rate of maximum of about 19.2% effectively, you can incorporate a company, and within that threshold of 25 million, you'll be exempted from tax, and that will effectively bring you into the tax net, because definitely we expect that the business will grow and then grow out of the threshold that are exempt, and you begin to also pay your taxes. And of course, we'll have appropriate record for those who are operating within the formal sector.
Finally now, before I let you go, you advise clients, big clients, big companies that you work for. At this time, what's the advice where you talk about tax system in Nigeria?
Well, it's a good time for the big companies, because several of the issues that we have been talking to government about, the issue of dividend tax, the capital market now, we expect that those in the capital market will operate more because they have other products that have been limited, particularly when it comes to security trading and when it comes to real estate investment company. We expect more investment, more activities to begin to come up, as the impediment of having to pay tax on their income has been tidied up. So for example, if you take the real estate investment company provision into consideration, their dividend income and their rental income will be exempted from tax if they declare it as dividend to their investors within 12 months. And the minimum declaration should not be less than 75% of their rental and dividend income. Any amount not declared will still be exposed to tax. That is also very huge for investment. Again, security trading, we expect that to also stimulate activity in the capital market when you are able to lend your security out for others, for the operators to trade and then return to you. That definitely will stimulate activity in the capital market. So it's huge. It is not just about VAT.
Yeah,
even though we know
of
that
course,
there
yes,
are
that's
lines
true.
that
I've been happy on that too. It's not just about VAT.
No, it's not just about VAT.
There are a lot of things encompassed in a lot of
which are both positive and some to generate revenue for government.
Managing Consultant Pedaball, thank you very much, Mr. Folorunsho. Thank you so much for coming on Business Nigeria. We hope to have you again to talk on this.